not have been surprised at the marriage of anatomy and art, because the history of anatomy is also a history of artists. Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, Vesalius, along with present-day artists who also render human anatomy, particularly someone that we recognize as being particularly brilliant, and that is Frank Netter, who did incredible art for SIBA. He was a physician, anatomist, artist, and I have the book. His daughter wrote a biography of him, Medicine's Michelangelo, The Life and Art of Frank Netter. And the thing that's rather touching about this is that when his mother was on her deathbed, she made him promise that he would not try to make a living as an artist. He managed to do it. He managed to do it. Well, I initially undertook this anatomical research to answer functional and evolutionary questions about human origins. But in the intervening decades, it grew into something more by chance than planning. For such unpredictable research, it's very hard to impossible to write a grant when you don't know when your subjects are going to show up. It can be any time. But in the now 40 years that we've been doing dissections here at Santa Cruz, I've dissected over a dozen gorillas, 4 orangutans. I've lost track of gibbons. It must be at least 20 by now, 2 dozen chimpanzees. I mean, just an incredible number. Carol and I keep thinking one of these days we're going to count them all up, but we haven't quite done that yet. And over the years, our dissection teams included a lot of students from UCSC and Cabrillo College students that Robin would bring over from her classes. And of course, Linda, Robin, and Debbie Bolter participating in so many of these dissections. A relatively newcomer is John Hudson, that has been contributing tremendously through his skill as an anatomist and his can-do approach. Nothing phases him, even if it means driving 3 frozen chimpanzees to Santa Cruz from Milwaukee in the dead of winter. About 10 years ago, an undergraduate anthropology major came to me interested in drawing bones and in observing dissections so she could sketch the muscles on the animal. That student, Carol Underwood, I'm going to get emotional. She came to be a passionate anatomist and has an amazing ability to combine the rigors of an anatomist with the intuition and the sensitivity of an artist. So we joined forces to create a book on the comparative anatomy of all the apes, gibbons, orangutans, gorillas, chimpanzees. And our goal is to bring together the data that we have collected over the years, showing the parts relative to the whole and the whole relative to the parts, the similarities and differences among the apes, females and males, infants and adults. The images from watercolor paintings of apes in their habitats, pen and ink drawings, multicolored diagrams, and digital photographs of muscles and bones are visually pleasing as well as being instructive. So you can look at all the pictures and not ever have to read the text. So our partnership continues the time-honored tradition of pairing anatomy and art, but we also add a scientific and an evolutionary perspective and try to bring the anatomy lesson of Dr. Tolp into the 21st century. Thank you.
generously agreed to take questions.
I'll just start with that comment, Adrian. I remember when moving into the building that there was some resistance to our having that freight elevator, and we made this argument about, do you really want to see these animals in the elevator with the passengers going up? And we went on about how messy and smelly that might be. And that was one of the things that helped us to actually get that freight elevator.
You have to be persistent.
So you started with bipedalism, upright posture, and you talked a lot about the apes that are not bipedal. So where are we in the figuring out what happened?
Well, you know, that's one of the things that we've really learned, because chapter 14 in our book is all about bipedal locomotion. And it turns out all of the apes have the capacity to be bipedal under a lot of circumstances, but their anatomies are all different from each other and from us. And so with emphasis on different muscles, the emphasis on the different length of the limbs, the masses of the limbs, and so that's one of the things that we want to talk about, is all the different ways that you can be bipedal. The other thing that's happening is that there's now quite a lot of fossil material. Fossil stuff is being discovered at a rapid rate, and one of the things that they have found now, foot bones from at least 3 or 4 different, supposedly the same species, but they're all different, and indicate that even 2, 3, 4 million years ago, there were a lot of different experiments in being bipedal, because what we have is maybe as recent as a couple of 100,000 years. But it started shaping up around 2 million years when we start seeing hominids leaving and populating other parts of the earth. So we've got a really refined system, and it works well, and that's why we've been able, you know, when you think about travel, you know, you think about global, you don't think about walking, but our ancestors had to walk. Occasionally take a boat later, but mainly it was walking, and just think of that.
So I'm wondering what you think the most interesting question in human evolution is right now.
I don't think that I could say it would be just one question.
But because it may be the top 3. Like sort of what, or maybe another way to put this is, if you could imagine solving any mystery, right, in that kind of fantasy way, which one would it be?
I guess that maybe another way to do it, if I could go back 3 million years ago, I'd really like to know how far they walked, how they made a living, how they were organized socially. You know, that's really, it's that transition from apes to humans, and that very early human, because what we see in this early fossil record is all kinds of experiments going on. And it could have gone any number of ways, and there's just more kinds of, they're having a terrible time with all the taxonomy of these fossils, because there's just much more variation than we could even imagine. And that's why this chapter, I'm talking about bipedal, all the different ways that the gibbon does it differently, the orang does it differently, the gorilla and chimp do it differently. They've got different anatomy, but they can get around bipedally. So to kind of think about the variation. So then when you think about that transition, that's what was happening 4 million years ago, was a lot of experiments. Because obviously, this kind of locomotion gives you a lot of advantages. You can get away, you don't have to be dependent on trees, you can go farther distances, gives you all kinds of possibilities for getting different kinds of food. And so it obviously worked, and that's why the experiments that we see in the fossil record even make it better, make it really effective. So I guess that would be one question, but it entails a whole bunch of questions.
If you have had an opportunity to observe or participate in a dissection of human being at medical school or something like that?
Oh, yes, I took human anatomy, but I also got a human cadaver just that was my personal one. And did the Ted Brand method. So I took it apart, in fact, Linda helped me. I took it apart exactly the way that I've done the apes. And so, as a result, I've got really nice comparative information on a sample of one. But one is better than none. So yeah, but that's not where I'm a little OD on human anatomy. It's really all the things that we don't know about the apes. Yes.
Have you found noticeable differences in the hand structure with the species that are more bipedal because they're not relying on their hands on the ground so much?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, the gibbon hands, the orang hands, chimp and gorilla hands, they're all different. The chimp and gorilla are fairly similar, but they're all different. And even some different muscles. The gibbon has a really nice muscle that goes to the thumb that's lacking in the gorillas and chimps.
But what percentage of time do they spend bipedal, the gibbons in comparison?
You know, somebody is doing a study in the wild on that, asking that very question.
Thank you.
One more question and then we have something else reading.
You mentioned early that it isn't just the legs that have to do with bipedal, but the whole body.
Right.
And as you were learning this, what surprises did you have about the upper body? You must
Well, yeah, that was part of, actually, the preparation for my PhD was, and that is how much, what we really are about as bipeds is centers of rotation. And they're all, so our arms, so we have rotation in the shoulders, we have rotation in between our pelvis, we have rotation at our hip, knee, and ankle joints. And if you walk along, you'll